I was thinking I'd like to create a list of books to read. So I was reading on the summary of Don Quixote. Now, I had watched Newsroom when it was on HBO. I think it was just a 3-season arc. It's a pretty short series, but I really enjoyed it, though, because it reminded me a lot of where I used to work. It reminded me a lot of just sort of that camaraderie, that sort of family away from family environment. And it was, I mean, here's a cast of people who, for all intents and purposes, these are social justice warriors. These were unabashedly liberal elites who, were non-apologetic for their intellectual capacity and their reverence for, equality. And it was sort of compounded by the fact that these were journalists and they worked in this, environment of information and news, reporting the news, which is, I think, it was a really interesting commentary on this debate between new media and traditional media, where traditional media is sort of criticized for being a bit fuddy-duddy and out of touch, and I think sometimes shortchanged by the conundrum that is content. And when I say content, I use content to label business. So the business side of storytelling to me is when you're relating to content from a business perspective, or when you're relating to story from a business perspective, it's reduced to content. The reductive terminology in my mind is content. But from a creative perspective, you would never refer to your story as content because it's so, it's not content to you, it's story, it's personal, it has perspective and, layers and, character and all of arcs and all of these things. You would never refer to it as content from a story side, but from a business side, content. So, it was this arena, the arena that is journalism, confronting the not only just sort of the political stage and all of the issues that arrive on a political stage, but media and how media is facing the challenges, wrestling with competing with digital versus being a traditional art form or traditional medium in any case. And I've talked about the ways that sort of having to keep the lights on can undermine an organization like a news organization, because they are forced to grapple with these issues of revenue and becoming viable with respect to markets and stuff, which can be very difficult when you have to be sort of a hard-nosed news organization. Tricky. And what I really loved about the series is that they made idealism romantic. They made it it's an Aaron Sorkin show, and it was kind of neat because it was making idealism romantic, intellectualism romantic, love romantic, human romantic, so not like human in the sense that these were coworkers, you know, and you cohabitate with your coworkers and you develop these friendships and these loyalties and these deep understanding of each other. That was meaningful. And all meaningful. All meaningful all the time. And so I loved it. And one of the themes, one of these threads, sort of was introduced in the first chapter. I mean, in the first episode, was the role of Don Quixote. So the main anchor of the series and his producer are reunited in the first. Well, yeah, I guess they are reunited in the first episode in a really bizarre way. He has this amazing rant about the state of America today. This extraordinary rant. And series. So he anchors the series, in fact, and he is the anchor of the news organization. So their main sort of primetime anchor. And he's sort of he's sort of this curmudgeonly, kind of bitter, paycheck chaser type. He's not like that by heart. Like, that's not how he is originally. But when we meet him, we meet him in this state because, you know, life's kicked his ass a few times, but he's at least successful in his world, right? He's a successful person who's become very jaded, based on things that he's experienced. And somewhere, either in the first or second episode, they have this debate about who is Don Quixote, and they both consider themselves Don Quixote. And then at the end of at the very end of the series, they have they sort of reconnect everything through this understanding of Don Quixote and the Fool, right? The Fool's narrative, the Fool's journey, and so they really tie it up really nicely because there's this girl, this university student who. So she asks him this question in the first episode when he's on the panel. She asks him this question about why is America such a great nation, and that's what sets him off. So then he goes into this blistering sort of dissertation as to what is wrong with the state of the world today, and then he looks down to the audience. And the woman who he thinks he recognizes, but he's not sure, holds up the sign that sort of, you know, says, you know, it doesn't have to be that bad. And that's how we meet him, and that's how the show starts off. And then there's this question that's posed in and around who is Don Quixote, who plays, you know, and they both sort of consider themselves this character. So, skip ahead like a few seasons, and the show wraps up with obviously the two of them, well, not obviously, but they do sort of reconcile, and turns out they've always been in love with each other. And this question is to the significance of Don Quixote in the greater fool. So the way that the show wraps up is this idea of the greater fool. And basically, the significance of the greater fool being that the world requires people to be fools. These romantics who envision life in a particular way and have the daring to go out and be that person, be that idealist, be that hero, be that romantic, stars in your eyes, kind of inspired, right? Even if you're wrong,